I now invite Patrick Shaw to talk about crowdfunding. Patrick is Vice Chair of National Crowdfunding Association of Canada. He's also Executive Director of York Technology Alliance. The national organization was established to provide a forum and network of all business industries.
You can save time on this one.
Very wonderful, wonderful.
So I'm under a lot of pressure here because my wife is part of the group, and one of the things that Lois actually does is coach people around presentation and pitch training. So if I don't get this right and don't move through in a rapid manner, I'm going to be hearing about this for at least until next week this time. If you have to leave, if you've got a bus to catch at 9 o'clock, whatever, or somebody to meet for a drink, go ahead and do that. I won't feel insulted. But I am going to drive through this with some speed because
It is the provides for 9:15 for today. So.
okay. I appreciate Lily including us and inviting us to come and speak to you. The word 1 million in terms of dollars will not pass my lips over the next 20 minutes. The kind of fundraising that we're talking through in crowdfunding are numbers that I think are much more attainable and much more supportive in your crowd and in the crowd in our communities to fund social initiatives and social entrepreneurs. I'll just tell you a little bit about the National Crowdfunding Association, because this group just started 1 year ago, and it has a very lofty kind of objective and mandate, representing across Canada all of those who are looking to establish portals or to become funders through or find funding through a portal in Canada. And it is interesting that we're finding groups like Indiegogo and Kickstarter are now looking to establish offices in Canada, presence in Canada. But I'll show you a slide of the number of portals and the number of providers of crowdfunding services in Canada today. So if you're new to Canada and you found getting a bank account in Canada tough, try to start your social initiative using a US crowdfunding platform. And you'll want to go back to wherever it was that you came to Canada from, because it'll be that difficult. So what I want to tell you is that this group really has an objective around educating, advocating, and connecting the crowd of users in this space to learn from each other, share their experiences, and to make it a more practical and profitable endeavor. So real quick build here in terms of understanding that there is a bit of structure behind the Crowdfunding Association, and the group has a very lofty mandate, and they would love for you, if you go home and you go to the Crowdfunding Association, NCFA Canada, and want to join, you will have, right now it's no fee. One of my roles as vice chair is to try and migrate this to a self-sustaining industry member supported organization or not-for-profit. So we need to apply some of the thinking that you're applying to your initiative, we need to in turn apply to the National Crowdfunding Association. I had the good fortune of attending a York Angels presentation just last week, and one of the presenters used this slide to describe where they thought the angel investment fit within an early stage industry development. And so I just popped on where I think crowdfunding starts to play a role. And much of my interest and excitement around crowdfunding is not on the equity side. I have done investor relations work around the globe. I've worked closely with the Toronto Stock Exchange. I worked with the Market Regulation Services. I worked with the OSC. I absolutely understand how the security regulators feel about protecting the investor rather than supporting the entrepreneur. Somehow we need to work through that, and today is the final day for comment to the Saskatchewan government about how Saskatchewan can enable equity investment through the crowd. So another quick link, if you absolutely must get equity through crowdfunding, maybe you're going to want to move to Saskatchewan. Better that than California, in that sense. So very, very quickly described, crowdfunding is about soliciting and collecting relatively small amounts of funding from a large number of people, being your crowd, using those online platforms and tools, especially social media. Lots of talk about collaboration in the earlier talks. This presentation is actually a collaboration. There are 5 different presentations brought together here. I've errantly did not include the reference to Propel Arizona, is the organization that started to map out, do the mind map process here. But I liked what they've done here in terms of simplifying and yet connecting the approach to getting revenue from your crowd. So they're talking first on one side of your network is thinking about gaining intelligence from your community. Crowdsourcing would characterize it. One of the members of Amplify it was interesting. There's a new acronym that now applies to our business that I had not heard of before, and it was multi-family office. Well, we're a multi-office family, so I guess we're an MOF rather than an MFO. So what my son, who runs our office in Calgary, speaks of slacktivists. So as crowdfunders, there are ways to tap into people's willingness to click through, make a small contribution to your campaign, and all of those small pieces add up. So the long tail of the internet, as it's described. So again, using that wisdom of the crowd, then tapping into the payment systems that are available to you through e-commerce and platforms other than your crowdfunding platform through the internet. And then the whole social networking turning, and we really like this kind of turn of phrase about making your project a movement. If it's about finding homes or assisting the homeless, the fact that you can do that one-off is kind of cool. It's really great for Yonge Street, if that's where you're implementing that. But if you can get your crowd talking about it, motivated about it, sending you some money to help you do something about it, and it becomes a movement, then now you're really, that's talk about social investment impact. So when we start to think of and start to hydrate into those network effects, start to look at that collective behavior, and someone did speak to the fact that much like any kind of fundraising, if you're doing that for a not-for-profit, you're responsible for fundraising or philanthropy, you know that if you can show a significant amount of funding already allocated to that fundraise, you're more likely going to get more funds and more of the crowd participating. The more that you can use the collective intelligence of your crowd, the more iterative you are, another word that's been commonly used tonight, then the more value that your funders are going to find and the more money you're going to generate. And then we get into some of the crowdfunding aspects per se. So as you dig into each of those components, I'm not going to go through the whole extended thinking of this particular mind map, because it says that these slides are going to be available or are around. But I want to drill into some of the things under crowdfunding where as you engage well, let's take a look first in the bottom before we go to the top. That really, the Crowdfunding Association of Canada thinks in terms of 4 fundamental models. And the one that's not high-graded, that would probably fit in the middle here, from the Propel Arizona slide deck, is this, that's actually a tough one to read, it's this rewards-based. Because you can really apply a rewards-based return to your crowd in any one of these categories. So you can start off with donations, and again, this is not brand new concept, but as you apply it to helping homelessness or food banks or whatever that is that you're focusing on, and using a crowdfunding approach, then there's a different take on what you need to provide to those donors in terms of a reward. And so what kind of a donation, what kind of a reward would you provide to someone who's donating you, who's giving you money because of your social impact around hunger and street kids? Off the top, I'd say maybe it's an invitation to dinner with a street kid, with someone who's homeless. People want to feel engaged. They want to be participating in your success or your initiative. The lending and the peer-to-peer, years ago, we were giving as family Christmas gifts certificates to investing in the platform Kiva. Everybody know Kiva? So again, not brand new, right? We should really have a pretty good understanding of how these platforms work today. And then that equity part, like I was saying, our group, the Crowdfunding Association, has met with the Ontario Securities Commission. Saskatchewan's moving ahead. Nova Scotia and PI have some pretty good advancements in these areas. Pretty soon it's going to be more generally available. But again, there are a bunch of issues around that. As I've talked to angels, they're saying, how are you going to issue actual interest in equity in your initiative? And as you get into the angels, or as you get into the VCs or the banks, they want to see clean term sheets. And you need to engage in making sure that you've done your due diligence as you start to think about really any one of these approaches to crowdfunding. Because you want to be able to present to the next investor that you've thought through and protected their interests when they can come in to your initiative. So, there's a date here, September. As of today, there's actually 67 portals in Canada that can handle your crowdfunding initiative. So if you want, and I'll run through a real quick story of a friend of ours who's raised significant money through Indiegogo, and you've undoubtedly heard some of the glamorous success stories of millions of dollars. I said I wasn't going to say that. Of large sums of money being raised in other places. But the reality is, if you can think through what you really need, you can tell your story really well. A lot of those very same principles that you've heard earlier this evening apply here, but apply in a much more social kind of manner. What's really cool is how the not-for-profit world and the social initiatives have embraced the crowdfunding platform and the crowd in funding the kinds of initiatives that many of you in this room are trying to advance right now. So one of the things that we've found and we've seen is the go-to-market approach has been replicated, is that you have to be very, very specific about what you're trying to achieve. You need to be able to make that connection. You know, it isn't telling a story like once upon a time there was a poor homeless guy. It's got to be about that person, how that person came to be homeless, what they lost or left behind, what you're doing for them or with them, and what success looks like, and preferably how you can make someone feel part of it. We've talked about this idea of priming the pump and making sure that you have a significant portion of your funding in hand, and then you really, really have to be social and use all of those tools online that make sense for your particular initiative. There's recently been a ruling from the CRA that any of the money that you receive, other than that equity form, which isn't totally, you can do an equity crowd fund today, provided that's coming from groups like the Social Venture Exchange, or the funds are coming through a couple of portals in Canada where, words are escaping me now, but if you're a qualified investor through a designated portal. And then the other thing that's really significant, this is that long tail kind of reference to online sales or success, is think about what that entry level donation or contribution could be, because you're not always going to get $100 from someone and have the same kind of reward for that. So what doesn't work is kind of the inverse of that. If you set your program up, you launch it, and then you just think, okay, it's online, everything happens automatic. Has anybody read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek? Yeah. This isn't it. This is 40 hours now working on the social media part of your fundraise. Then the other 40 hours of the week, you actually work on the business. So again, be as strong, as clear in your terminology and your description as you can. I think that there was some conversation about having a video. You absolutely need to do that. There's a really great company here in Toronto that's mapping brainwaves, and they talked about spending $10,000 on their video. Now, they raised several $100,000. They've been at it for a while. But that sort of thing is absolutely essential. Be realistic about what your goals are, and that's why I say the M word is kind of over there with those other 4-letter words. Only go after what you need and be appreciative for what you do get. So if you're not providing something back to the person who's sending you their money, you're probably going to lose them soon. Cool company, started by a guy who was in the financial services industry in downtown Toronto, wanted to grow prized tomatoes, go figure. And he was worried while he was downtown that out in the burbs his tomatoes were drying out, tomato plants are drying out. So he latched onto this environmental sensor that could report to him through any smart device the environmental conditions that his products were in. And now he had to go to he wanted to go to the crowd. He had some friends and family funding. He wanted to use crowd raise to help diversify his financial risk. And he never intended to actually use the crowd as his storefront, as the retail outlet. But in essence, what he did is he went through this, I think you see here, he managed to connect. So his reward was, you're essentially buying this at a deeply discounted price. So in very, very short order, he essentially created 1,000 new customers. But you can even go to RBC with that, and they're gonna smile at you. That's pretty cool. If you're building a customer base, and it was delightful to hear Mark Nicholas, the CTO, CEO here, and to hear him describe that there he was sitting working at the kitchen sink while his daughter was getting tucked into bed. Phone rings, picks it up, it's Amazon asking him if they could be his channel partner. Who'd have thunk it? Like, I've been working a lot with technology, small and mid-sized technology companies through an organization called Tech Connects that I was referring to. And many of those folks are severely challenged in the marketing and the sales sides of their business. To actually have someone like Amazon call you up and say, hey, can we put your product in our e-store? It's pretty amazing. So what Mark did was he raised over $100,000 in his first go, and then reset his. These are some of the things that he said he really got out of the crowdfund experience. So it absolutely does have a high element of PR and marketing attached to it. Now, reporters aren't going to cover you the way they would have a year and a half ago because you're in the crowd, but you can still get some very significant recognition through this approach. What was interesting was that Mark told us that he spent almost 60% of his time on social media and interacting with his new customers, the people who wanted to know what he was doing, how he was advancing. The fact that he was going through an iteration of his product and getting it to be even more miniature, they wanted to know that. He went radio silent for 4 days. People thought that he had walked. He had an uphill battle to bring people back on side. So you just can't have radio silence at any point in time once you started your campaign. And in fact, they did use Indiegogo. He established the U.S. bank account, the U.S. mailing address, and paid the U.S. withholding taxes, and still found it a rewarding enough experience that he's going to go back for a third tranche. So this is the one I figured everybody probably heard of. It's got the really high valuation. But there are other things like the floods in Alberta, where community groups, and now there are groups in Alberta that are going to the crowd to raise funds to assist in the flood recovery, where governments or municipalities just can't cover or support the costs of what's going on in those communities. And once again, Lois actually worked in High River over the summer with some of the families, and the kinds of loss that they were incurring, the kinds of stories that she could tell about what they were going through, could raise significant funds for the recovery of those communities. Some of the key drivers, and again, I'm not going to take time this evening to run through it all because this is a little bit theoretical, other than this bit of, it doesn't show on the screen if you point it at the computer. So this idea of the brain drain, I'm really only kidding about going to Saskatchewan. Great to drive through. All those jokes are real, but I can see your dog run away for 3 days. You know, this is the objective of keeping people in Canada. This is why we've got a vigorous program like TiE has. This is why we have great incubator deals going on in this city, and we want to keep the brightest and the best here working in our own community. So these are just sort of in the background for your own interest. And we talked about the benefits or what investors are looking for. The idea of this, and we're a little bit egotistical in North America. We do think that we have a lot of good ideas, but North America has been slow to pick up on the crowdfunding opportunity. And there are other jurisdictions in the UK and Australia, you can already do equity crowdfunding in those jurisdictions. So some of the best practices, some of the approaches, some of the learnings, they're being gathered through this particular association and shared with its members. And this is maybe one more slide, but I just wanted you to see the ramp up and the speed that people are coming into this space. And sometimes we think as social entrepreneurs, we've got a bunch of time. Well, folks, there's a lot of urgency to do what you're going to do in your initiatives, but also to get involved in this before it should turn a corner, because everything, as they say, has its day. And that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you real quick. Happy to entertain questions.
Any question, Paul?
Are there specific I noticed a lot of social good or social causes on Indiegogo. Do you have any recommendations on specific platforms for social?
Take a look at Fundraiser out of Vancouver. They've already raised over $30 million for Canadian good causes. You know, there's an interesting thing happening too in the social good area, in that corporations are starting to, as much like we saw with what's the group that we're I should. Thank you. They're doing a fundraising match Well, one of the groups that Amplify is working with right now is looking at establishing the same sort of thing in communities across Canada, but they will be the portal, and the program that they're addressing is adolescent mental health. How do we get the stigma out of the conversation by getting more people talking about it? How do we do that? Any number of small community projects that people in the community kind of vote with their wallet now. You know, there's that old adage about voters vote with their feet, walk away, they don't vote, or they leave the meeting. And what we're looking for in the corporate application of social crowdfunding is that communities across Canada can say to a big corporation headquartered in Mississauga, Ontario, that this little project for $1,200 is important to our community. And now that corporation, sort of to the corporate social responsibility concepts in the Royal Bank even, that's what we want funded, and the company can put the balance in to make it happen.
Wonderful. Any last question? Patrick.
George,